They've reinforced their ranks there, they've replenished their ranks there, they're dug in there, and they have declared that they intend to fight and to attack the members of the IDF as we operate inside Gaza City. In terms of the actual grind there inside Gaza, we are going to see house-to-house fighting. Jared Kushner, during the first Trump term, put forward what I would say is one of the most problematic resolutions to the Israel-Palestinian conflict since discussions and negotiations to end this conflict came about. Hi everybody. Before we get into today's briefing, I just want to thank all of our viewers, and I want to ask you that if you enjoy this video, please give it a like and make sure that you check out the MirYam Institute YouTube channel, where you'll find much more analysis, podcasts, and incredible and unique footage. If you want to see our very latest content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll get all of the notifications right away. And remember, we want to hear your comments. We want to know what you think and the questions you want answered. So please let us know in the comment section and we'll be sure to get back to you. And with that, it's on with the briefing. The IDF's operations towards entering full bore into Gaza City are well and truly underway. At the moment, we're operating on the outskirts of that city, and part of the job at hand is to move the population from inside Gaza City down southward towards some of the humanitarian zones that we're all familiar with and we all know about, and that's taking some time. So just to put it into context, there are about 800,000 to 1 million people who live inside Gaza City at this time. It's reported that about 5,000 to 7,000 have thus far vacated, and the reason is twofold. The first is that Hamas is preventing them from doing so. That's something that our viewers will be aware of. But it's also a case of having the ability to transact. So there is a cost that is being extracted from some of the Gazans when they arrive at these humanitarian zones. For example, the purchase and rent of a tent, the purchase of food, all of that is being put to them where possible at extortionate prices by the terror organization Hamas. And so given that calculus, many of the Gazans are preferring to remain in situ exactly where they are rather than moving southward. Now, ultimately, if the IDF does decide to operate inside Gaza, we will have to induce the relocation of the Gazans from the kinetic areas of the war. That's in line with our principles of this war since the commencement of the conflict, and I think that we'll see that happen here as well. And one of the things that I'm quite hopeful about is that once the preponderance of the Gazans move down southward, Israel and the United States of America will hopefully be able to ratchet up the amount of diplomatic pressure on the recalcitrant Egyptians with a view to inducing their willingness to open the border between the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula, part of Egypt's sovereign territory, and start to do that which they're actually required to do under international custom, namely to absorb the displaced population there inside the Gaza Strip. I'm very hopeful that the increased movement and the increased number of the displaced will bring about a better, more positive, and more responsible response from the Egyptians, as I've just described. In terms of timing for this operation, Prime Minister Netanyahu put forward a very clear date. He stipulated that he wanted the Gazans out of Gaza City by October the 7th, 2025. And the symbolism of that is very apparent and very understood by everybody. In terms of the actual fighting there inside the Gaza Strip, once the area has been depopulated, in order to preserve the lives of the Gazans, there seem to be two very different timelines that are currently playing out. In Israel, the chief of staff of the IDF, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, has expressed that he thinks that the fighting could continue for 6 months at a minimum. 6 months at a minimum. Now that gels somewhat with Hamas's determination to stand and fight inside Gaza City. They've reinforced their ranks there, they've replenished their ranks there, they're dug in there, and they have declared that they intend to fight and to attack the members of the IDF as we operate inside Gaza City. But the second timeline is one that was put forward by Special Envoy to the Middle East, perhaps Special Envoy for Negotiations, Steve Witkoff, who is the representative of President Donald Trump. And he expressed just yesterday that he would like to see the conclusion of this war inside the Gaza Strip by year's end. So we're coming into September now. That leaves about 12 weeks of fighting according to the Witkoff timeline. That's a very different timeline than that put forward by Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir, that of 6 months. So we'll see what occurs. But in terms of the actual grind there inside Gaza, we are going to see house-to-house fighting. We've seen that thus far inside our operation throughout the Gaza Strip. But we will, of course, be able to carry that out, we anticipate, without being burdened by the added complication of an American president threatening to and then implementing a partial arms embargo on us as we prosecute a war for our very survival and for future generations and the safety and security of future generations, as occurred during the tenure of President Joe Biden. We don't expect that any such embargo will be threatened or implemented, much less implemented by President Trump. And so our ability to move swiftly through this enemy stronghold is probably increased. I expect the timeline will fall somewhere between the Witkoff timeline, therefore, and the timeline of the Chief of Staff. Special Envoy Witkoff spoke about the idea that he is working to put forward and is very close to being able to release and unveil a comprehensive plan for the day after inside Gaza. And as an Israeli, I have to confess that I'm somewhat perturbed and troubled by that, because I think that this is evidence of the notion that if you yourself do not promote the long-term outcome toward which you are fighting, somebody else will do that in your stead. And that's precisely what I think that we're seeing here. I think that we are bearing witness to a situation wherein Prime Minister Netanyahu has not, in my view, with sufficient vigor, affixed a political end game that he has promoted, that he has outlined the contours of, and that he has said, in the pursuit of that end game, we are going to continue this fight. And in the absence of that being put forward by the Prime Minister, you have the Special Envoy doing so in the name not of the Israeli Prime Minister, but the American president. We're fortunate that this American president is, of course, a great friend of the state and the people of Israel. But it is concerning to me that present at the discussions about what the day after in Gaza might look like was none other than former Prime Minister Tony Blair and former senior advisor to the president during the first Trump administration, Jared Kushner, who also is the president's son-in-law, as everybody knows and understands. And the reason that I'm concerned about that is twofold. Number one, Jared Kushner is certainly a friend of the state of Israel, but he has made statements about the day after inside Gaza that have been somewhat brilliant and forward-thinking, and other statements that have been far less so. I'll give you an example. In a conversation that he had, I believe, at Harvard University shortly after this war began, he expressed that with a more muscular diplomatic posture, the American president, then Joe Biden, might be able to induce President Sisi of Egypt to accept and absorb the Gazans into the Sinai Peninsula. Very wise, very sensible policy position. But then he followed it up by saying, and in the interim, it might be sensible for Israel to absorb the Gazans into the Negev desert. Far less wise, far less sensible a position, essentially advocating for Israel to import Hamas into its own sovereign territory. So I'm very hopeful that the wise, sensible side of Jared Kushner will have been on display during this White House meeting, rather than the less sensible, less wise side that I've alluded to. The second reason that I'm concerned about his presence there is that despite most people's perception, Jared Kushner, during the first Trump term, put forward what I would say is one of the most problematic resolutions to the Israel-Palestinian conflict since discussions and negotiations to end this conflict came about. most people perceived what Jared Kushner termed from peace to prosperity, also dubbed incidentally the deal of the century by Donald Trump, as the president would allude to resolving the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Most people perceived the peace to prosperity outline, blueprints that Jared Kushner promoted as being very positive for Israel. But that's because they didn't actually look at it, they didn't actually read it. Within the Peace for Prosperity outline, Jared Kushner called for the establishment of a state for the Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, with contiguity between the two that would bifurcate north from South Israel. He then additionally called for the ceding of East Jerusalem in order to establish a capital for this putative Palestinian state, which on the document expresses that that capital can be called Al-Quds, the Arabic name for Jerusalem. So it was a very problematic suggestion and a very problematic blueprint, but it even went further. It was even worse than that. It actually called for the enlarging of the Gaza Strip, not into the Sinai Peninsula in order to create room for the Palestinian Gazans, but actually into sovereign Israel along the Padran Desert in the south of our country. So I very much hope that Jared Kushner will have abrogated and cast off from himself that very, very foolish, naive blueprint to go from peace to prosperity, and will be viewing anew all of the dynamics in the area given the recent events in a post-October 7th reality. That is my hope. And I will also say that Tony Blair, I hope, will be able to exhibit a similar strain of new and fresh thinking. Tony Blair, for decades, was one of the leading proponents of the two-state delusion, a completely ridiculous and impracticable policy position that has been allowed to live on for far, far, far too long, should be really consigned to the dustbin of history, and the quicker that it arrives there, the better. I don't know if Tony Blair is going to be able to step away from that decades-deep set of thinking. I will not be surprised if Tony Blair seeks to suggest that the Palestinian Authority ought to take governance of the Gaza Strip, something that I would completely oppose, and I hope the government of the State of Israel would oppose as well. And it's possibly for that reason that Minister Ron Dermer, Minister of Strategic Affairs, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest confidant, is also in Washington, D.C. at this time, not present at the meeting, but certainly part of the coordination of the outcome of that meeting. So a very interesting time. We'll wait and see what happens, but I again would like to see my Prime Minister outline what he wants the day after to be. And I will tell you that my opinion is that the day after needs to involve the relocation of the Gazans out of the Gaza Strip into Egypt. Egypt is eminently well-resourced to absorb them. And as long as the Gazans remain on the borders with the State of Israel, the State of Israel will not know peace, and our future generations simply will not know security. I think that in the context of an ongoing negotiation and an ongoing negotiation towards some sort of a deal for the release of our hostages, the minimum that the people of Israel, the government of Israel, might be willing to accept is essentially aligned with the Witkoff outline, which called for the release of 10 of our hostages, but 10 of our living hostages, incidentally. But the problem with that outline, and the reason that I don't feel that that outline should be pursued at this time, is that just a few weeks ago, we saw the propaganda video filmed and streamed by Hamas that showed Eviatar David, a young man taken into captivity on October the 7th, who has been held in the dungeons of Hamas since that date, completely emaciated, starved, looking like something of a living human anatomy chart, so clear is his bone structure around his clavicle, his shoulder blades, his arms, his forearms. and being made under duress by his Hamas captors to literally dig his own grave. When one witnesses videos such as that video, and I am confident, uneasily so, that that is not the only example of a hostage who is in a dire, dire condition. When one sees videos of hostages such as that, one understands that all of the living hostages, estimated 20 in number, are humanitarian hostages, must be released immediately, returned home to Israel. And it's no longer possible, in my estimation, given that video that Hamas put out there, to suggest that there are 10 hostages who are in greater need of coming home than 10 other living hostages. I think all of them are on the brink of being lost to us. All of them must come home. And that's why I understand very, very well the Prime Minister's insistence that he is no longer seeking a partial deal, but now wants the return of all of our hostages, the 20 who are estimated to be alive and the 30 who are no longer presumed to be alive. So in terms of the minimum that Israel might accept, perhaps 10 of the living, though I want to see all 20 of the living come home immediately. It may also accept a deal where all 20 of the living are returned to us, and there's an ongoing negotiation for the recovery of the remaining 30 bodies. But bottom line, the people of Israel want all of our hostages home, both those who are alive and those who are no longer with us.